never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.
Hi guys, welcome back to my Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today, I'm so excited to have Nicole Smith with me. She is the founder of the Dignity Defense Institute. I let that sink in for you, Dignity Defense Institute. The moment I read that, I thought, no, I need to talk to this woman. The dignity is something that we take so either for granted or fight so hard for it. And the Dignity Defense Institute, I thought, what is that? So what is that? Nicole, welcome to my show. Thank you for making this world a little bit better, one interview at a time, one story at a time. But now I'm all excited. Tell us more about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Dignity Defense Institute sort of sprung out of many a life experience, as most good things do, I think. I have a background in communications, a master's in law and public policy, and I have fought for dignity of life around the world for over a decade now. So essentially, the idea is that if we're going to fight for human rights, the thing that powers the fight for human rights is the idea that we all are in possession of inherent worth that is unable to be removed or added by humanity. It's just foundational to all of us. So.
That's beautiful. Maybe let's define dignity. What is dignity? That is sort of a word that is sort of most people probably can't put a definition to it. How would you define it?
Yeah, so dignity, a lot of times, it's actually, if you look at, there's a journey for this word that if way back when you would have said the man carries himself with dignity or he's a dignified man, it means that you hold a higher status, right, place, right? And so you and me and everyone else that are human hold this position of higher status. So if we were to compare ourselves to a mere animal, as Mark Twain once said, we're the only animal that blushes or needs to, right? We're in possession of conscience, right? And so that means that we sort of hold this higher echelon within the mammalhood of the animal kingdom. And so we all hold ourselves in that esteem. And because we are dignified, because we are in possession of that dignity and the inherency of that dignity, that means that it's worthy of protection. Right. So if someone is hurting because they have inherent value, because they're so worthy of it, we should fight for them. Are they hungry? Are they cold? Are they hurting in any way? They have so much value that it's important that we take ourselves out of our own situation, see their importance and meet them right where they are, if that makes sense.
Very much so. And I think that comes back, 700,000, 500,000 years ago, when we were still living in tribes and caves. There was this inherent need to look after each other, because if you were ostracized, if you were thrown out of your tribe, that was a death sentence. You couldn't survive alone in the cold. Mm-hmm. So therefore, those kind of things are hardwired. So if we accept that this is actually a logical way and that really nature has tried to force us, well, why the hell is the world now as broken as it is? Because you can't tell me that dignity still plays a role. Dignity that is, if at all, it becomes a cynical, yeah, right, kind of thing for most of the countries where I look around. From civil rights abuses to civil war to the many issues that plague our society, the tremendous amount of domestic violence, the femicides around the world. You could talk for hours. Where the hell is the dignity? Yeah. So why the hell have we developed this way?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's we kind of have this approach that the idea that someone that sees themselves with inherent value as being higher are more likely to see other people with the same amount of higher status. And if we have cultures that see each other with the inherent dignity at this higher level of being, of worth, they're less likely to commit offenses against the human person. Those deep violations that you find that were powered by genocide, that powered slavery, that powers sex slavery. Here in the United States, we have human trafficking is just a rampant condition. Slavery that's hidden behind closed doors. Why? Why is it? Because it's very easy to buy someone if you don't see them as human, right? So they're expendable. And if you were to recondition society to believe that we all are of equal value and worth, it's a lot harder to enslave someone if you see them as an equal person, So that idea of just retraining generations to believe in that equal line, that inherency, is one that builds out all of these offenses, all of these deep hurts, because everybody is basically going, hey, I can't enslave people, I can't hurt people, and I should help my brother that's hurting. So the idea is essentially to get down to that foundation, re-educate on that idea, and sort of educate this out of existence, right? So I don't think it'll ever really be out of existence, because we're all human. We have a propensity to that hurt, right? But yeah.
I find it hard.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. I just find it hard to translate that into real life, because wherever I look, I see people putting themselves above others. And it is sometimes absolutely bizarre what one sees when one opens one's eyes. For example, I live in New Zealand. We have got, depending on where you live, between 10 and 30% Maori, so the indigenous people here in our country. And there's always this, the white guys are racist to the Maori. In all fairness, between you and me and everyone else listening, some of the most racist people I've met were Maori, who were looking down upon Indian nurses, or in my case, there was a lady who was really, really sick, Maori lady, and she looked at the Indian intensive care nurse, who was a superb, lovely woman, and looked at her. I don't want to be treated by that. And I thought I was angry, because here we are, we're working our best. First of all, we work in international teams, so for crying out loud, you should recognize that. But there was that. So I don't understand it. I don't understand it, how we try to get ourselves better than the other. And it is bizarre. Is that a mental disease? Is that a personality disorder? What is that?
I know. Well, and I think that's the problem. It's sort of this, we see in the United States too. It's sort of this like jockeying position of the idea that oppression is a one-way street, right? You see that within your culture, we see it within ours. Our history obviously has an impact on the African-American culture that's obviously different than the experiences of the European-based or the native-based. We have all of these different cultures that are sort of at play. And one of our all pitting against each other, saying, the only way that you can be racist is this way, which the reality is, it's we all see it. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah. And the concept that, like even the concept of slavery, we don't look at it from all sides, right? So history has shown that slavery is long running, and it's on the basis of tribe, it's on the basis of sex, it's on the basis of religious association, it's the basis of race, a tribal association. Every culture has experienced it, because it's always this innate desire to position yourself with pride. Okay, I feel powerless, so I must exert power over someone else based off of this criteria. Other than, that's okay, I've set this line, I've drawn these lines all over the place, every culture draws these lines. Well, that's the thing. We shouldn't be drawing lines at all, because when we draw these lines, we're instilling that idea into our children. And that's what creates a generational curse of repetition. that you saw in that lady, that racism that, is perpetuated by generation to generation. And so again, going back into time a little bit about my experience is that I did communications on these global human rights cases. So I would fight for, we had an association in Africa that essentially would buy children out of the child bride system. So essentially really impoverished families that are selling their daughters, and our group would come in, they would buy the bride price back and they would put them into school. So what was it about that was to break a cycle? The education part. They brought her in and they said, hey, you are worth more than the price that they put on your head. You will be educated. You will be able to be self-sufficient and understand your value is not what they placed on you. It's more than that, right? But that's what they do in that culture. But it wasn't just that culture that did it. So go over to Iran. There's one of the cases we take on is a man is a part of a religious minority. He's thrown into prison because he's a threat to the national security there because he's not a part of the regime's ideal. So we go in, we raise awareness about this, and we force a political hand on it and get him released. He said, you are worth more than just what this regime says about you and your religious association. You're not lesser than, you are equal to, right? Take them out of that situation, you realign them, you are valuable. So much so that's why we came and got you, right? That I didn't even know the man, we don't know these people, but they're worth it. They're worth making an effort. And that's why it's important to do this concept of one person at a time, is because when you show people that they matter enough, where I'm sure in the situation you were saying, where I don't want to be treated by this other race, like you're an awful, dirty, filthy person, where what is her response to that situation, right? The nurse she is part of that solution, that slowly over time that we change it, because it's not going to be tomorrow that everybody just miraculously changes their mind. But we have to basically instill in everyone, one person at a time, that you are valuable enough, you're in possession of dignity that is equal to and inherent. There's no lines, there's no buts, there's no ands, there's no nothing. It's just condition of being genetically a human person. And that is foundational too. So the moment the culture starts drawing those lines is the moment we cut them off. Like, look, no, we don't do that. So organizationally, it's very easy for us to support things like, hey, we shouldn't enslave people and put them into the human trafficking range. Like rings. It's bad to buy people, right? It's bad specifically to buy ladies. Let's just draw that line. In general, it's not good. And most people will support that concept and that idea. It's very easy, but when we get into the concepts of abortion, those things are a little bit harder for people to grasp, that it's wrong to draw a line at certain points within the womb, because if it's not foundational, like at the point of the scientific genesis of the human person, then you're allowing lines to be drawn. And so I believe it's really important that we have those discussions foundationally about the human person having inherent value at the point of the scientific genesis of the human person, because essentially you're basically going, hey, that's a line you're drawing, at a point of development, a human development. And my daughter has disabilities. She actually may never meet any of those developmental cues throughout her entire lifetime, but she still has inherent value because she's a human person, So these are a lot of discussions I think need to be had. And I love that we're talking cross-culturally, global, because your experiences are different than my experiences. I've had interviews all over the world. India, they have a caste system. That's a different experience than what I do here in the United States versus what you have too. So I think it's wonderful to have these conversations and just shine a light on different cultural experiences that, the human experience is basically the same, pretty much just kind of how it's played out every day is a little different, right?
Thank you, Nicole. I mean, this is so beautiful what you're saying there. And I absolutely understand every single aspect that you brought up. And it's so intriguing because you brought so many things up, so many examples. And it's a bit strange because today it's really we are preaching to the choir. We too are absolutely in the same boat, and we have the same core beliefs. I make a point in treating the janitor and the cleaning lady just as nice, or most often better than the higher echelons of the hierarchy, because I actually, well, just because I can, because I do. And that makes me proud. And with that, I've changed the culture within my small bubble, so to speak, where I work.
Yeah.
And that is beautiful. For that, I'm proud. But the moment I look outside, you have to say that there are so many things wrong. And they are often wrong by wrong guidance from the state. So it is, if you look classically back and the ways Jews were treated in the Third Reich, in Nazi Germany, there were 2,200 laws against Jews. So basically every form of maltreatment or mistreatment was actually legal. So absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So the good German who obeyed the law, well, yeah, they could do whatever they wanted to do with Jews. So let's be quite clear about it. Only because it's legal doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Only because it's not legal doesn't mean it's wrong. Okay. And I love it though that you're saying we need to have those discussions. And from those discussions, I mean, but how do you do that? And I'm raising now specifically, I'm challenging you a little bit, because worldwide there's the perception that America soon is ending up in a civil war. And I'm not sure how extremist that is, or if we're actually looking at, if we're seeing that, because if I look at the Black Lives Matters movement 2-3 years ago, before COVID hit, hang on, that was civil war where I come from. So where are we heading with you? Are you building your little bunker at home? Are you stocking up on?
Yeah, it's been, I don't know, like, okay, I guess I'll just take a moment to sort of explain what it is like from an American perspective watching this. So you have to understand, there was a deep hurt that was from all sides that has sort of perpetuated this, but definitely perpetuated and amplified by the media. So much so that I think at actually one point I was like, you know what, I'm cutting the media off. I can't watch it anymore, because it was just this lie that I have many friends from all racial, cultural backgrounds that live around me in my neighborhoods, and nobody is out here rioting against each other. But I mean, there are in places, but the day-to-day person wasn't really experiencing this unless they were, putting themselves, they're the extremist idea of putting themselves into that limelight, that experience. So I just remember just feeling this deep amount of hurt for the people that felt as if they were being marginalized, but also from myself and for my children, because I never wanted them to feel guilty for the consequence of their birth. In 1920, it was wrong for a Black child to feel guilty for the consequence of their birth. He was born Black. There's nothing wrong with that. And in 2020, a white child should not feel equally guilty for the consequence of their birth.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kept thinking this over, just praying through it, like, okay, it's going to be okay, and being nice through it. Right. So this was always really interesting. You go into a grocery store, we have all racial identities that go into grocery stores. Right. Just there was this overabundance of niceness I could feel. Now, they may have just been nice in general. They always like that, but I just felt like there was more niceness that overflowed from people because they were, hey, she's a white person. Maybe she thinks that I don't love her, because she's white, and vice versa. It was just like I did on a day-to-day basis more experience that than I did I mean, of course we do experience those. Like I go into different parts of town, I'm not welcome, because of my racial identity, and they may feel like that the other way around. That's a present idea. It's not like it's not present at all. Let me make you understand.
Mm-hmm.
But the American experience through that, me being just a typical, middle class lady that's just walking through life, there was a lot of hurt on all sides, and just hurt for them, wanting them to know how important they were to me, and just because they're my fellow American, but also a fellow human person. So I don't know. I thinking about this idea of like a civil war. I don't know. It's been a wild ride. I think probably for you guys too. The last 2 years has been almost 3 years, which is just absurd to think that it's been that long. Has been a lot of ups and downs. My husband's an engineer. He's like, okay, we're going to start prepping. I'm like, are we a prepper family now? He's just like, you never know. You never know. I'm like, yeah.
I love to hear that. Well, let's be quite clear. Let's be clear about it. I live in New Zealand. Our Earth crust is about this thick. Okay, so earthquakes, volcano, a few cyclones. I mean, we are used to that. Okay, your town might be there, it might not be there tomorrow. So we are actually, most New Zealanders are preppers. And that is actually a good thing. So disaster preparedness, guys, let's be clear. Let's, regardless of your political thinking, it makes sense to have a month or two of food around, because you just don't know what kind of disasters strike. So, okay, so let's not dish all the preppers. So we want you to prep, guys out there, but what you're referring to, of course, is the extreme 1% of the prepping community, who is often then depicted on television, etc., as the nut jobs. No,
they're not.
Exactly. So prepping, yes, and maybe is your husband right? Are we two living in a too nice a world? Are we putting the blinkers on? Do we wear rose-colored glasses because we just want to see the world as a nice place? Are we stupid to do so? Or is there still a chance that we bring people together?
I think that there is. The odd thing is, I think in communications, I think there's just an awareness, maybe I have a little bit more so, that there are a lot of people that are pulling strings, right? And they do this very methodically over time, where it's like a little bit of an adjustment to the ideal, a little over time. They mold and manipulate a mind or groups of mind into believing certain things that are totally against what in their core they know is wrong, right? So that's actually how the Reich did what they did, right? They took a piece of weakness, a feeling of inadequacy from an entire group of people, and he manipulated that a little bit at a time for one of the most advanced technologically advanced civilizations of all time, right? To do heinous things against what was just totally unheard of, right? To take literal people, and a lot of it is why they did it behind closed doors, why they burned and destroyed people behind closed doors, because even if they threw that in front of a standard German eye, they wouldn't have accepted it, right? That's awful. But they do it over time, they manipulate. And so I think that there's a way, and I wouldn't want to call it manipulation, but it's the same basic principle, is to a little bit over time going, you are important, you are valuable, you are not what they say, you matter. The things that are in your head, and why we have a mental health crisis, is that we've been so inundated with these ideas of what is ideal, that when we don't meet up, because we won't ever meet up to those standards, that we're manipulating it in our own mind to say, I'm not important, I'm not valuable, I can do nothing, I am powerless. And so if on the individual level, if you can just click those little dials slowly over time, we can realign the vast majority of a culture into believing that very truth. It's been seen throughout history that as much as we want to demonize that European experience, the Great Britain, the Brits, they did actually enslave, but they're also the first ones to free. We have more slaves in existence today globally than we ever did during the time of the European slave trade. And yes, they did terrible things, but they also were trying to adjust in a way that was right from the beginning, from the get-go. The most wealthy and largest slave owner in all time was African. These are things that we just don't talk about,
Exactly.
but we just, they say whitewash history to believe that the white man was most evil. And I'm like, nope, he was evil, but all of them were. Like, don't like, this narrow idea is also damaging, I think, to the idea of dignity that says that I can't possibly be the one in the wrong because of the way I look. I can't possibly be right because of the way I look. Just because I have less melanin on my skin, that means that I am more evil just by my nature because of my genetics, what my genetics says about me.
So true.
And
I think no, you're so right. You're so right. There is, my goodness, I mean, we could talk so much about how we marginalize groups and how we all are guilty of that. I'm always astounded by my own prejudices. However hard I work at them, there will be strange thoughts coming in my mind, which I have to keep in check, like it or lump it, however cosmopolitan I see myself. So there's the one thing. There are certain core beliefs that are laid down at very earliest times in our childhood, so handed down by generations, so to speak. And if we are not careful, if we are not look at our core beliefs, those things that drive us from deep down without us knowing, then we will never be able to get out of those things. We need to.
And I think too, well, on that point, I think a big part too is this just intense desire to avoid suffering. We don't find purpose, right? And purpose is service. Purpose in life really is about seeing those around us, and we feel empty because we don't have a sense of purpose. And how we find purpose is through looking around us and saying, hey, how can I help? What can I do? Right. So they say, suffering is refinement, right? So the moments in which you're challenged the most is those moments in which you find a deeper sense of purpose. You don't want to go through it, but on the other side is just this beautiful revelation of what is true and right. Because a lot of times it's like, okay, it wasn't just about me, right? So my daughter was born in distress almost 3 years ago. And, I understood the value of human life being foundational, but when it's your own child that almost dies, when it's your own child that ends up with disabilities, it makes you look at the world just a bit differently, because now it's home. I call it giving purpose, flesh and blood. She gave that mission that I had to show people how valuable they are, flesh and blood. When we go out in public, she walks in a walker, and I see the way people look at her. They see there's such an intense amount of like, oh, go, you can do it. She's just this little person, this little tiny walker, just struggling through like a basic function that we take for granted, right? You can sit your 1-year-old down typically and they walk around and run, and you go out in public and there's tons of little ones like that. But right, when you see a child that is just fighting for that basic thing, you see that light in that person come to the surface and you go, they get it. They may not fully just their day-to-day is not in it, but they get it. They understand that, fight for that, you go, So there's light in these dark moments. And I've seen it through her and my experience with her. Like, people just come up and they just find so much joy in her. And that struggle of just being very isolated and a very hard time, like going through COVID, where nobody could come help us through that really hard time.
Mm.
I wouldn't change a bit of it because I have her. It's pretty powerful. A great sense of purpose that was derived from those moments of struggle, and probably many more throughout her life as we sort of battle through these basic things that we all kind of take for granted, I guess. So.
And you're so right. It is that degree of humility and that degree of authenticity that you're actually seeing there in front of you every day. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's where I made, whilst I was speaking negatively and quite down over the last half an hour, to actually say, well, I've got so many problems. Are we not just living a pipe dream here? I actually don't think so. Otherwise, I wouldn't do this show. Otherwise, I wouldn't go out and bring beautiful people like you on to actually start the discussion, start the communication, and see what we can learn from each other. So whilst the world is polarized and whilst we live in societies that are more and more separated from each other, you have just nailed it there. I have just nailed it. We are separated. So what's the solution to that? Let's stop that separation. Let's actually start meeting at the table and figure out what are our commonalities. And it is sometimes so beautiful to just actually come together in a sport, in a common kind of thing. That might be a church. Camaraderie, some kind of new tribe, quotation mark. If we were to go all together into cooking classes, I make it up as we go now. Let's create a cooking class for everyone within the block, and everyone, we take turns, and there will be an Indian living there, and Sri Lankan, and whatever is there. So, and everyone is teaching all the others their most favorite food, their most favorite meal. Don't you think we would all end up laughing and enjoying and having a good time? Chances are, yes. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you work together in a football team, regardless of which color you are, where you're coming from, etc., but you're all passionate because you want to beat the other team and you're beating them, can you not imagine that you all have got a similar degree of joy that this goal was planted? Those are the things.
I like that you mentioned that, because that's kind of the idea, is putting yourself into, if you look back at these wonderful moments within even the civil rights movement, that the teamhood is a lot of what breaks the bonds of those societal teamhoods, right? So if we were just to put, like you said, everybody on a team, everybody's on the same team, it's called Team Humanity.
That sounds a bit like us being tree huggers. So we need to tune it down a little bit.
But to see the commonality, right? What that commonality is, we have different experiences because of our cultural identities, right? That what we've lived in and experienced every day, that we can have pride in. There's also things that we can, hey, that's probably not a good idea, because what was not at the forefront was that we're dealing with people here. We were putting what at the forefront was this cultural truth that was they're lesser than you because of X, Y, and Z. And
should it be? Let's. I just wrote it, the cat amongst the pigeons. Imagine you are now the president, and you have got pretty good powers. How would you feel about saying, everyone, I want you all to do a DNA test, an ancestry test, So you are so white. Oh, and I hate these
Oh, yeah.
Mexicans, and I hate these Jews are worst ever. And then you actually look into your own genetic makeup, and you say, "Oops, 10% Jew. Oh, where did that come from? Grandma."
Yeah.
So
Well, actually, that's kind of, I think there's been, I think that should, I like that basic principle, probably not the forcing part, but
okay.
yeah. But yeah, actually, I always thought that was really interesting. This idea of, heritage and genetics are totally different, right? So you get these DNA back, and they have there's more Great Britain than African, and some people that look really African, and people that are like thought that their heritage was Irish and they're predominantly like South American or something. I think
Exactly.
there's just a beautiful poetic justice in that,
Yeah.
in the sense that what makes America really special, I think, is that we're a melting pot.
Correct.
And I
Yeah.
mean, I in my family, like one half has been here for like 100, 200 years, like hundreds of years, like pretty much before we were a nation. We're here. My mom's side is much more new. They've 2 or 3 generations, but you look both and they're very mixed, as far as genetic identity.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us beautiful. And I think that's what's wonderful that we should celebrate. Like I'm from the South, and one of the wonderful things about our cuisine is that we're very much open to fusion food. We have no pretense about food.
Mhm.
So, we have these Indian restaurants here that do a lot of different types of Indian cuisine fusion with Southern cuisine, or Asian cuisines that we fuse with different types of Asian culture cuisines and Southern cuisine. It's really fun, but you go to like San Francisco, you'd never see that, or you go to New York, like, ooh, no, I love that. We're supposed to be sort of celebrating every aspect of ourselves. And,
Well, exactly.
So, yeah.
And I see, I mean, I went into rehab 8 years ago, and thereafter I came out of rehab quite an empty shell, and I thought, okay, so who am I? I had only worked, and drank to forget my pain, and then suddenly, who am I? Who do I want to be? And I like food, so I started with cookbooks, and I had a little collection. And I thought, well, stuff that. I actually buy myself a
Wow.
cookbook from every single country in the world. And I did.
Oh,
And I
that's
did.
cool.
So I have got cookbook. I've got a whole wall of cookbooks. It's just quite a
Oh,
pride.
that's awesome.
Well, exactly.
Well, you should
And
be proud of that. That's wonderful.
well, exactly. And talk about inclusiveness. When you then look, just take any of the books out, and you will see if they're often written with the same passion, with the same, oh, yeah, that you a little bit of that and a little. And you just realize we all like to eat well. We all like to dance. If you're into dancing, exactly.
Savor.
Why don't you look at other dance? Why, if you are into martial arts, why don't you look at the martial arts of a different country? So suddenly you actually find commonalities, and it is that makes it so wonderful. If you then want to take that one step further and say, well, actually, wouldn't that not be nice to learn more about something? So if you are in the position that you maybe have money and that you maybe want to advance yourself, let's stick with cooking. You love cooking. You're constantly on the cooking channels. What stops you booking the next holiday as a cooking school holiday in a complete different country, maybe a country which you don't know so well? Maybe, just maybe, that country where you maybe have a few prejudices about. Maybe on purpose, expose yourself to the reality of that country.
I teach this to my 7-year-old all the time. I said, if I was really quiet and introverted as a child. And so when I got out of high school, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. So I tell my 7-year-old all the time, it's really important to stretch yourself. So I felt social anxiety all these years. I didn't like talking to strangers. So
Yeah.
I would spend the whole first year of my college experience. If I didn't have someone to sit down with at lunch, I would sit down with a stranger and get past the social
Yeah.
anxiety. It says, when talking to my daughter, I always say, you know, if you have a feeling of uncomfortableness, if you have a feeling
Yeah.
that makes you want to sort of cringe into it, you don't back up from it, lean into it, and expose yourself to those feelings over and over and over again until you can get through them. Because it's our aversion as humans to that feeling of suffering or hurt that puts us back. Lean into those feelings. And that's how you have personal growth. Because when hard things happen, which you knew this, you know, your own personal journey was a lot about having to find out that you had to lean into it and not lean away from it. And that feeling is where us as humanity is really struggling. We don't want to feel that hurt. So we're leaning away from it back into what we know and what's comfortable. And what's comfortable is what you've been taught, the same cycle of oppression, the same cycle of hurt, the same cycle of struggle and abuse. You know, my organization deals with human trafficking a lot. A lot of the women that we encounter, or the people we work with encounter every day, they have been trafficked their whole life, a lot of them, or they tend to lean back into that life because that's all they've ever known. It is incredibly difficult to lean forward and come out of something, even if you weren't there by your own choice, because it's really uncomfortable. And so I think a lot about just talking foundationally, like we are right now, about these realities we experience within our cultures globally are really important. And it's about leaning into it. Okay, hey, I see that this is happening within our culture. Doesn't that kind of make you feel like we're sort of going back into a pattern of oppression or you know, bad choices? We're not viewing them as human. Like in the United States, where our ideological spectrum is getting so wide, especially what the media portrays, that we're so much based on an identity of whom we vote for, not our commonalities of just being people living out life, right? That we're allowing that division to sort of perpetuate. We're getting into a tribalism mode of you are not an equal person because you believe X, Y, and Z. Well, you know what? I know there's a lot of people out there I don't believe with. I do see you as a human person. I think you may believe that you're just very wrong about a lot of positions you have, but it doesn't, you being right or wrong doesn't remove your humanity.
I like that. You're very wrong.
You may be very wrong about the way you see the world.
And that's so beautiful to see. There you are, speaking about integrity, and then you're wrong.
Yeah, you may be really wrong.
But it is.
Well, if you're going out and hurting someone, that's really wrong. But that, yes.
There's a beautiful saying: "You're right, and at the end of my nose." And I think that is beautiful to say. Bottom line is, yes, you have got rights. Yes, you can make yourself heard. But there is a line that you do not cross, i.e. hurt others in order to bring your point across. Now, that's bullshit. And I like that. So we need to actually start with ourselves and need to hold ourselves accountable. Because you can't say, oh, I want a better world, and you treat everyone else like shit. So often enough, we need to start with ourselves. So let's think about what would be maybe 3 things that you would advise our listeners and our viewers to do today that maybe can set themselves up to experience something beautiful and new. And what are simple steps that we can take in the right direction?
Yeah. Well, I would say first reflect. It's really important to know that everybody's journey and experiences are a little bit different. Foundationally, they're the same, though. So what is it around you that makes you feel most uncomfortable, as far as like a personal stretch, right? And instead of coming back from that, lean into it, right? So when you go out into your everyday life and you encounter those things that are different, maybe it's a person with disabilities that, you were never really taught to speak to them like they're human. Okay. Speak to them like they're human. Speak to them, even if they're nonverbal, look them in the eyes and talk. How are you today? Are you feeling good? Maybe they never say anything back, but you saw them as a human person. You stretched yourself in a way that, in an experience where you got to see someone else on equal footing that you didn't necessarily do before. Maybe it's just not because you were taught to believe a disabled person was lesser. Maybe it's because you never experienced it, right? So sometimes it's just reflection and a day-to-day application as far as like searching, and then look at yourself, inward reflection, a little bit more about how you can take that out into the everyday world, right? So I think seeking out purpose is really important for self improvement. You can look at yourself and say, hey, I'm really valuable. But maybe you need to go and volunteer somewhere, and maybe you need to adopt a child. Maybe you need to go to a NICU and to hold children that have no parents to cuddle them. You seek out purpose and that connection outside of your normal everyday environment. Because once you find that purpose, once you find that way of reaching out in community and impacting other people, you're going to see your inward light up in a way that you can't imagine. Because what is it? You go every day, you go to your job, you come home, you do, just the same old thing. Get outside of yourself a little bit and see how you can bring purpose into your day-to-day and touch people in a way that is uplifting, that's light, so those just thoughts.
That's beautiful.
For me. Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful. And that all goes down the route of intentional living. If you go to a friend and just hang out, well, that's not really intentional. So you let whatever sort of things happen. Or you could go to the same friend and intentionally say, you know what, today we're going to walk to a certain trail somewhere. That's just cool.
Yeah.
We can actually chat, we get outside and those things. So suddenly you're still hanging out with your friend, but you're doing something with a purpose.
Very intentional.
And indeed, right. So if we do that kind of same thing, maybe more often in our life, and make it a habit of doing something with an intention, and with the intention of making yourself the new and improved version who you always wanted to be. Maybe this would be a good start. So we are privileged to be able to make choices. You can choose to eat healthy, or you can choose to eat shit. You can choose to hydrate or run around like a crisp. You can choose to do some exercise or rather be a couch potato. These are all choices. You make them. You can choose if you accept this world for what it is, polarized and heading towards the cliff. Do you want to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff? Or do you want to just a bystander and say, yeah, okay, 9.2, crash. 9.2, 9.8, crash. No. Or actually, do you want to start building a fence up there on the cliff and maybe stand on the cliff and prevent others from crashing and maybe the world from crashing? You have got the power. You can't change the world, but you can change yourself, and you can change those people around you by living a life that is worthwhile living. And therefore, for you to take a leadership role by being authentic and humble and just doing the right things when no one is watching, you will be amazed how many
Yeah.
people are watching, and how much you become a leader, and suddenly the world around you changes because you have
Yeah,
changed.
absolutely.
And that is beautiful. So if we can do that, wow, I believe we can change this world. I believe we can make this a world that we can actually be proud to live in. And
Amen.
I meet so many people either through my show, or yesterday I did a big clinic. So I met wonderful people, and it's not just talking about their shoulder operation or their back operation. I always make a point, sort of try to figure out who they are. And I had the most amazing people. A woman who walks through a neighboring town, and she has built a group of women who are picking trash up. Trash on the side of the road, and they're saying, "No, we are making this world a better place, one trash
Amen.
can at a time." And they're going out there and they're changing lives by starting
absolutely.
discussions. So you can start little micro revolutions in your own family, in your own circle of friends, and I like that. I truly like that thought.
Well,
that
I think we were taught that the only way to change the world are these big grandiose things, when in reality it was just on the day-to-day, everyday life.
Exactly.
That makes massive changes. I know.
Nicole, you are a wonderful force of nature. I feel the passion within you. I see you going out there, and it's so wonderful. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you so much for being willing to share your passion with me and with my audience here. If people like what you're doing and want to know more about you, where can they find you?
Go to dignitydefense.org, really easy. We also are on pretty much every social media, Dignity Defense Institute, or look up Nicole M.Y. Smith. Very important. I married a man common of name, but not of character. So it's really hard to find a Nicole Smith. So you never know who you're going to get. But So, and then I also have my own podcast called Pro Dignity, No Doubt. You can look on, pretty much any place that streams podcasts as well. So we would just love to bring you into the family and change the world one story at a time.
I love it. Guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast, because all of Nicole's social media details and contact details are down there. And once you're down there, you might as well press the like and subscribe button so that you get informed when we have got new guests coming on, which happens twice a week. Twice a week, I've got the privilege of talking to wonderful people who, every single one of them, has changed my life by giving me a new idea or a new insight. So I'm constantly growing by talking to these people, and you can grow just as well by listening in. So guys, we all have the power to change this world. Let's make this come true. I invite you to come along on the journey. Nicole, you're a wonderful woman. Thank you so much for coming onto my show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with passion. Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.